Well, I certainly hope that you have been delighted by Peanuts comics in your life. Those are still running in a lot of newspapers, and I'm glad for that. There was one time when, in the comic, when Lucy and Linus and Charlie Brown, they were laying on the grass on a hilltop, and they were looking up into the sky, and Lucy says, "You know, if you use your imagination, you can see lots of things in the cloud formations. What do you see, Linus?" And Linus said, "Well, those clouds up there look like the map of British Honduras on the Caribbean. That cloud up there looks a little like the profile of Thomas Eakins, the famous painter and sculptor. And that group of clouds over there gives me the impression of the stoning of Stephen, and I can see the Apostle Paul standing there to one side." And Lucy says, "Uh-huh, that's very good. What do you see in the clouds, Charlie Brown?" And Charlie says, "Well, I was going to say I saw a ducky and a horsey, but I changed my mind." Poor Charlie. Oh, I love that guy. Well, following the resurrection of Jesus Christ, he presented himself and he taught his followers here and there for 40 days. And then he told the apostles to wait in Jerusalem and he would meet with them. And what happened there caused them, like Lucy and Linus and Charlie Brown, to gaze into the sky. They gazed into the sky too, with wonderment. It says in Acts chapter 1, verses 6 to 11, that we just read a little bit ago, that they gathered there and they had some questions for Jesus. "Lord, is this the time when you're going to restore the kingdom to Israel?" And he said, it's not for you to know the times or the seasons that the Father has fixed. But what you do need to know is what your mission is, what you're going to do. And you are going to be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth. And then when he said this, the sky-gazing moment happened. It says, as they were watching, he was lifted up, and a cloud took him out of their sight. And while he was going, they were gazing up toward heaven. Suddenly 2 men in white robes stood there, and they said, "Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking toward heaven? This Jesus who was taken up to heaven will come back." The Message translation, which I often turn to for a fresh look, says, "Jesus was taken up, and they stood there staring into empty sky." And then the angels said, "Guys, hello. Why are you staring into empty sky?" Now, I got to say that if I was there, I would be staring. I would be, like in 3 days, I understand NASA and SpaceX are going to be sending 2 astronauts up to the International Space Station. A rocket called Falcon 9 at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. 9 engines will burn with a thrust greater than 5 747s at full power. And if I was anywhere in range in Florida of this event, I would be staring into the sky. So had I been there with the apostles, I'd have done the same thing. Jesus ascended. I don't get that. That's a wild and crazy thought. He was lifted up. A cloud took him out of their sight. My mouth would drop open, and I would stand there with a dumb look on my face. But what's interesting to me is the ascension does not get much attention. And I've asked myself over the years, why? Is it because it's a strange event? Hard to wrap our heads around this. Hard to picture it. Artists have tried to paint it, and it's just, it doesn't work. It's awkward. Is it because it seems a rather minor part of the story? Matthew and John don't mention it. Mark doesn't either, unless you read that added longer ending, which is probably added later, only Luke and Paul seem to give it much attention. So you can almost forget about this scene, and even in Luke, it kind of passes quickly. Is this why it doesn't get much attention? Oh, by the way, Luke wrote Luke and Acts, right? So he talks about it at the end of the Gospel of Luke and at the beginning of the book of Acts. But Luke and Paul are the two that really give it some attention. So you can kind of pass through this scene rather quickly and not think about it much. Is this why it doesn't get much traction? I mean, compared to the birth of Jesus, whoa, that's a big deal. And his life and his teachings, we dwell on that a lot. His death on the cross, crucial. Resurrection, amazing. All of those, huge, huge, huge. But then ascension, we kind of pass that one by. Nothing here, we say. Nothing much teachable here. Philip Yancey, though, in a book said, you know, to Jesus, personally, this might have been his big day. Because Jesus, when you think about it, after all he had done and poured out, he now was heading home. Think what it meant to Jesus, says Yancey. Oh, the disciples, it was resurrection. That was their great day. But to Jesus, ascension may well have been what meant the most to him personally, returning home to glory. Think what it meant to the apostles. Jesus departs, and there they stand, and the more perceptive among them probably were saying, okay, he said to go and teach and baptize, be my witnesses to the ends of the earth. He's gone, gulp. Now it's up to us. He's departed, gulp. Now we have to get started. There's a legend that when Jesus entered heaven, the angel Gabriel said, Master, you have suffered for all the people, and now they know all about you and your love. And Jesus said, well, no, not yet. Just a little handful really know. And Gabriel looked perplexed, and he said, just a handful? Yeah, Peter, James, John, a few others. But they will tell many more, and my story will spread to the ends of the earth. And Gabriel frowned and looked rather skeptical. He knew what people were made of. And he said, Lord, in case they fail, what's your other plan? And Jesus said, I have no other plan. We shudder to think of it, perhaps, but it's true. When Jesus departed, he left the keys to the kingdom in their fumbling hands, in ours. He has no other plan. I don't get the mechanics of ascension, but I do get this. Events that stop us in our tracks, like a pandemic, for instance, that we're in the middle of, it forces us to look at certain issues. Big, sudden, unexpected changes make us stop and think and reevaluate and re-strategize. Get ready maybe for some new ways of being and doing. In fact, provoke us to start experimenting and trying new ways. Fascinating right now. People sharing with me things they're doing kind of differently, things that they're discovering in this time of pandemic. And some of this is good. Some of this is beneficial to our lives, and we will carry it forward. Well, when it comes to ascension, this may have been what Luke could see. How this kind of an event stops us in our tracks and we recalibrate our lives. And so that's why maybe Luke highlights it as an important part of the story. There's meaning then here at the ascension of Jesus. But still I ask, why don't we think about it and ponder it more? What is it about his ascension that causes us to duck a little bit, dodge somewhat? Maybe just maybe, we're kind of bothered by the ascension because it depicts Jesus leaving, you know? He goes away. And I don't like that. I don't like the part of the story where he leaves. I want him to stay. A little girl watches her daddy drive away. And even though he said, it's just a summer job, I'll be back, 3 months seems like a million years. And Alaska, a million miles. Yeah, I want Jesus to stay. Absence, it makes the heart grow fonder, they say, but it doesn't just do that. Sometimes it breaks the heart. It's inevitable, it's part of life, but it can be a very hard part. But then, F. Bruce, always the wise Bible scholar, said, Christ is ascended, but his presence at God's right hand means he is more effectually present with his people on earth. What? His going away means he's more present? How can this be? Then Bruce quotes the Apostle Paul in Ephesians 4, verse 10. A fascinating comment which seems to be made almost in passing. He who descended is he who also ascended far above the heavens, that he might fill all things. Professor Barclay adds this: Jesus did not ascend up on high to leave the world. He ascended up on high to fill the world with his presence. When Jesus was here in the flesh, he could only be in one place at a time. He was under all the limitations of the body. But when he had laid his body aside and returned to glory, he was liberated from the limitations of the body and was able then to be everywhere in all the world through his Spirit. To Paul, the ascension of Jesus meant not a Christ-deserted, but a Christ-filled world. Here's the paradox. By leaving, he's more here. With you, with me, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. In the flesh, he could be in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, but in the Spirit, he is not locked into one time and place. He is with us, with his beloved, anytime and every place. After standing there staring, after the angels reminded them that Jesus who left is coming again in a fresh new way, the apostles went to the city to wait and prepare for the next exciting chapter to begin. The coming of the Spirit, and the launching of the church. Friends, as I ponder the ascension story, this is what speaks most to me just now. Like the apostles standing there, staring at the empty sky, sometimes we gaze into absence. Hope has vanished. Can't see it anymore. Sense of purpose, gone. Where is it? Where do we go from here? What do we do now? Whenever you and I stand facing absence, the question is, will we listen to the angel's whisper? There is more yet to come. Just the other day, I read a most fascinating story about a man named Edwin Booth. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Probably most people haven't heard of him, but there was a time in our country where he was very famous. He was a stage actor and kind of the Laurence Olivier of his day, 1865 in that time frame. He was famous all over this country and around the world. He had a terrible upbringing in life. His father, Brutus Booth, was often drunk and drank himself to death, stranding his family, far away in California, and they had to make their way back to Maryland. Edwin's first wife, Mary Devlin, died after 2 years of marriage, another absence. Then he remarried. His second wife struggled with mental illness to such an extent that they spent every last penny trying to find medicine that would help her. They ended up bankrupt. Then something happened that Edwin would have to deal with his whole life. His own younger brother assassinated President Abraham Lincoln. John Wilkes Booth was Edwin's younger brother. This brought shame to him and his family. Edwin himself was a pro-Union, pro-Lincoln patriot, and his own brother had killed the president. Edwin faced absence, loss, shame. He could have withdrawn. He could have quit. What would you do? Where would you go from there? Well, he knew acting, and he pursued acting and excelled in it. And then one day, he was in Jersey City, and he was on a railroad platform waiting for the train. The train was coming, and it was crowded, and the crowd jostled around, and this one young man was pushed, and he began to fall onto the railroad tracks. Edwin was nearby. He dropped his bag, and he rushed over and grabbed that young man and snatched him literally from death. The young man looked at Edwin, recognized him from photographs of the famous actor, and he said, "Well, that was a narrow escape, Mr. Booth." Edwin Booth soon learned that the young man that he rescued from death was Robert Todd Lincoln, the eldest son of Abraham Lincoln. You know, amazing things can happen when a person moves past staring at absence and believes there's more yet to do. When the apostles listened to the angels, they soon found a new surge of courage and sense of purpose. I like how Barbara Brown Taylor puts it. It was almost as if Jesus had not ascended but exploded, so that all the holiness and love that was once concentrated in him flew everywhere, flew far and wide, so that the seeds of heaven were sown in all the fields of earth. So may it be for you and me, for us. Amen.